This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the plan for Mali and talking about it with journalist and filmmaker Michael Kirtley. Also with us is William Jordan, former U.S. diplomat in Algeria and head of the Maghreb Bureau at the U.S. State Department. General Vincent Desportes, who teaches at Paris's Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Alassane Kanté works in the city of London while keeping an eye on events back in his native Mali. He joins us from London. And we're joined by France 24's Yves Irvine, who is in the Malian capital, Bamako, for an update. Yves, before I go to you, I just want to let everybody give a listen to the fact that the French, we've been talking about the situation there, that the French dancing around this issue of the north of Mali. There you see that the north, the Malians themselves there, at the time, back in May, had declared an independent state called Azawad. Earlier in the day, France 24 contacted Chadian journalist Abdel Nasser Garboa in Kidal and asked him about how the locals feel about the deployment of French forces.
All night long, eyewitnesses saw French military helicopters taking off from Kidal. They headed to the nearby Dera mountains, where they shelled Islamist headquarters. Everywhere we go, young people shout, "Long live Azawad," and they do the V sign for victory.
So Yves Irvine, there you heard it in Kidal, they're chanting "Long live Azawad." They're not chanting "Long live Mali."
Well, that's in Kidal. Here in Bamako, it's quite a different image you get. I mean, a lot of people here, even the fact that, the French are said to have arrived into that airport in the centre of Kidal alone and not joined by the Malian troops, caused somewhat of a ruckus. People saying that for them, the MNLA, while it might not be the strict Islamist radicals of Ansar Dine and MIA, it comes back to pretty much the same thing. For them, it's an armed terrorist group, and they don't want to see any negotiation with that. However, some of the elected leaders of the North have been telling me that if, on condition that the MNLA lays down their arms first and foremost, and that they renounce this idea of independence for the Tuareg population or even for the north of Mali, that potentially they are the one out of the myriad of different rebel groups that are worth talking to.
The MNLA, Yves, which told Radio France International this morning that they are recognizing now, of course, the territorial integrity of Mali, but they're not ready to lay down their weapons until something formal has been fleshed out. And I know that there is talk of substantive talks with the Tuaregs of the north.
Well, the latest I have been told from officials here in Bamako is that there will be talks soon. In the coming days, they hope before the end of the week, but as we speak, nothing official had been entered into. There are members of the MNLA also currently in Burkina Faso ready to negotiate, but again, it's all being left pretty much up in the air. Talking to MNLA spokespeople this morning, they said right now the real priority is fighting alongside France and other international troops to rid the northern region, that vast mountainous range just 1,500 kilometres north of Bamako, of terrorists. And, they had that, catch of Mohamed Moussa Ag Mohamed this morning, so they're really underlining that and really trying to once again highlight their line that they are not associated with the other terrorists in the region and they do not want Sharia law.
But Yves, just one final question for you. If there are substantive talks, I suppose it's the president, the interim president of Mali, the one who's supposed to take them to elections in July, who will head them. What is the star power right now of this president, knowing that the coup leaders back in March, well, they're still sort of lurking in the background over at the barracks on the outskirts of town where you are?
Indeed, again, François, very, very murky waters. I've spoken to members of the military there in Kati, which is where Captain Sanogo is based. They don't want to speak out publicly at all at this time. They say that really it is not. They want to wait and see how things play out. But Of course, Gicundra Traoré is under great pressure from that side. He said earlier this week that he would be willing to speak to the MNLA. I'm not sure that would go down well with them, seeing as how, the whole reason for their coup d'etat last year was because of the advance of the MNLA and the fact that they just couldn't accept that. But for the minute, Captain Sanogo staying very much out of the limelight here in Mali.
Yves Irvine, thanks for that update from the Malian capital, Bamako. Alassane Conte, there you heard it. In part one, you heard Michael Kirtley describe how just before the French intervened, there was this big sit-down of Tuareg movements and the MNLA was very much present. And there you heard Yves Irvine say how in Bamako, the man on the street doesn't want to hear about that group. So can they be brought to the table? Can everybody sit down? It seems complicated.
Yeah, it is definitely very complicated. And I think there are two things that I would like to point out. The first one is that the MNLA is a majority of Tuaregs, and the Tuaregs are a minority in the north of Mali, right? So at the moment they have arms, but they're not a majority. The second thing is, which is quite interesting, that they just arrested two leaders of ACMI and Mujao, but they didn't arrest anybody from Ansar el-Din. And Ansar el-Din is a fork of MNLA who wants Sharia all across Mali. And Ansar el-Din let the Mujao and ACMI do the bad job of actually kicking out the MNLA without being involved forcefully, so because they actually have a very good relationship with MNLA. So I do not actually think the Malian government should, or anybody should be speaking to the MNLA. I think the first thing to do is to get the people of the north to have a voice and to have actually real leaders that can represent the region, which I agree has been quite left alone by the government. And they really need to first get the act together and have a leadership, which is, I don't think the MNLA is that leadership.
Michael Kirtley, your thoughts about what Yves said and here just now Alassane is saying about how in Bamako they don't want to hear about the MNLA.
Well, I think that's definitely not a secret. The Malian military has made it pretty clear in a variety of ways that what they want is vengeance. And I think that that's one of the big problems that France is going to have to face. They've already seen certain atrocities taking place that have been committed by the Malian military side by side with the French. And I think that in the future, this is going to be a huge question mark that the French will have to face in terms of its own public image. Are they willing to think about the idea that they may be leading the way towards a kind of bloodbath up there? That's a question that many people have talked about, including within the ECOWAS community. I think on the other hand, it would be a mistake to say that the MNLA is working. I mean, for example, the MNLA had its base in Menaka, just north of Niger. And Ansar Dine forces, together with Mujao forces, attacked them and kicked them out. So to say that they're somehow allied even today, it would be, I think, a misconception.
But do you see those secular Tuareg groups taking on Ansar Dine, the more religious ones?
I met a while back with the president of the MNLA, whose name is Bilal Aga-Sharif, and I asked him specifically about that question. And I asked him, and he said, the first thing you need to know is we hate Ayad Agali, the head of Ansar Dine. And they're from the same family. They see these people as not only renegades, but they also see them as traitors.
All right, General, let me ask you. We heard over the weekend the French president warn against revenge attacks. Mm-hmm. And we know there already have been some. What can the French do beyond simply warning the Malian soldiers not to take out revenge attacks? What can they do?
I think that so far the situation is not too difficult because there is a few Malian soldiers on the ground. There is much more French soldiers than Malian soldiers, so they can watch and look at what they do on the ground. I think that the issue will be in the future when we will have all this so-called MISMA force on the ground. It will be much more difficult to watch them and to prevent these kind of things.
Alassane Conte, when the French hand over to African forces, how will the Malian soldiers behave?
This is a great question, and I think an area of great concern for myself personally. I don't actually think that the French can just pull out just like this. I think they definitely need first to, as we mentioned before, make sure the institutions are established again. There is no confidence in our democratic institution in Mali. Like nobody believes them, and nobody actually trusts the military. So and you have seen, you mentioned the exaction, etc. And I don't think that's only the military, by the way, because there are other military groups. Some of them are actually Tuaregs as well. But I think definitely this army needs training. This army needs means, and this army needs a purpose. And I think we need the Western forces to help us with that.
William Jordan, the Malian army, they've trained it for a long time. In fact, the coup leader himself went for training in the United States. Does training work?
It doesn't seem to have done very much so far. I mean, given how much money and how much effort we put into trying to train up the Malian military, and despite what General Ham said a few days ago about not having had enough of a sort of a civil military component in the training, you know, I can tell you the documents that we used to send up to Congress to justify funding the program had that in there, because part of what we were doing was trying to create units that would indeed be respectful of rule of law and not violate human rights in this way. I mean, we went into everything 10 years ago in Mali knowing full well what the situation was on the ground. So, I mean, this is a big issue, and I don't know how we're going to deal with it, but it's got to be part and parcel not only of various bilateral efforts that will no doubt be mounted, but sort of an international effort. This has got to be part, I mean, if we're talking about a UN peacekeeping force, for example, this has got to be part of its mandate, in my opinion.
Michael Kirtley, how do you do it? What do you do that's different? Especially when you know that there could be drug money, there could be, it's easy enough to influence one side or the other.
I think it's extremely complicated, and I tend to agree with Alassane that it's very unlikely that the French are going to be able to just let this go, because they also have to think, I would assume that they have to assume responsibility for an action that they've done in terms of liberating this north. As François Hollande seemed to indicate, right now it's very much about reconstruction that he's talking. I think the actual war on terror, which was more at the beginning, has now subsided, and now it's a question of reconstructing Mali. How you put these different factions together is going to depend on a mediator. Who's going to be the mediator? And it seems to me that right now the only mediator in place is France.
This all sounds very familiar, does it not, General Desportes? Didn't we see this somewhere else in the world, where a country goes in to try to stop a threat of these jihadist radicals and then winds up having to stay? It sounds a bit like Afghanistan.
Yes, a little bit, but there is a lot of difference with Afghanistan. First, the enemy here in Mali are foreigners, people, in fact. In Mali, they are foreigners. In Afghanistan, the Taliban came from the Pashtun tribe, so they are from Afghanistan. It was very, very different.
But you're hearing that in our discussion that among the Malians themselves, there's no love lost.
Excuse me?
You heard amongst the Malians themselves, there's a lot of animosity.
Yes, obviously, this is a big challenge, and it is a very delicate situation even for the French military. As you know, this operation is legitimate so far, but the legitimacy is built not ex ante but ex post. So all what depends what is going to happen. And so for France, for the French soldiers, and for the French Republic, it is very important that things not goes too badly on the ground. So I think that the idea of sending a United Nations observation mission would be a very good idea. In order not to let France responsible for everything is going to happen on the ground.
Alassane Kanté, do you agree?
Yes, I do, but I think that I'm surprised that there is one key thing that I didn't hear among our colleagues on the stage, which is that we need a government, we need leadership in place. The reason why the training money was wasted was because the leadership was wasting it. Some of them was not arriving to the army, and in some cases it was, I agree, the army leadership that was wasting it. So first we need some type of leadership in Mali that the people trust, and that even the people of the north as well trust can make a difference. And I think that is key. And once that is in place, how we go about it in terms of international force, etc., will then be defined. But first, we need to have somebody in charge. John Kounda is not the elected president of Mali.
He was the head of the National Assembly, but there are elections coming up in July. Do we just wait for those elections?
I guess we cannot wait at this moment, right? We have to put things in motion, and we have seen that putting troops on the ground takes a bit more time. So definitely an international force in Mali or UN force should start probably moving already. However, definitely having elections is key. Is it going to take place in July? I'm not sure, because has the leadership changed that much? Do we have? Don't we still have the same people that were in the old government, still with the same money and still with the same means to actually be at the leadership and pay for elections? They're still there, right? So I'm not sure July is the best, but actually at this point, do we have a choice? I guess probably not, because the French actually are quite in a hurry, and I can understand why they will be in a hurry to organize elections. But is that the best thing for the people of Mali at this point? Probably not. But do we need a new leadership? Definitely. So it's quite complicated. But I'm not entirely sure. But definitely new leadership. So probably election in July is the best.
Michael Kirtley?
I think that's what's really important is to understand the fears on the ground. The fear is if the French leave, the terrorists will come back. The fear is in Bamako against the government itself, because there's a fear of the corruption that's been endemic there over the past several years that's led to this whole problem with the military being totally inefficient. The fear on the part of the South towards a potential other Tuareg rebellion or MNLA rebellion, and the fear on the part of the Tuaregs themselves that they're not going to have some say in terms of their own self-determination. They've made it very clear that the only way that they will actually put down their arms is if they have direct negotiations with the president of Mali. And that direct negotiations, in their mind, is supposed to lead to a kind of federation or an autonomy of the North at this particular point in time. Those are too many fears to deal with. Somebody has got to settle this down. And perhaps creating an election process where possibly it was under the surveillance of the United Nations, where the people of the North were included. This might be a step, but it's just a step.
All right, just a step, and whether or not they'll make that deal is something that we'll continue to watch. Michael Kirtley, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank General Despelt for being with us, William Jordan, and for joining us from London, Alassane Conte. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.